I tend not to talk about foreign conflicts on this channel. I prefer to focus on the UK because we've got enough problems of our own. But right now, it looks like there's maybe a 50% chance that India and Pakistan are about to go to war with each other. And if this does happen, there will be serious ramifications for us here in Britain. There will be fighting and violence on our streets. So much so that I'm pretty sure the police are actively preparing for this right now, but I'll talk about that later in the video. And to a small extent, this has already started to take place. Just yesterday, we saw footage coming from London of the Met Police trying to keep Pakistani and Indian protesters apart. Now, with 7 million people from those two countries here in the UK and tensions clearly rising, I think it's time we had a conversation about this. So what started all of this? Well, a few days ago, there was an attack against Hindus in Kashmir. Now, Kashmir, for those who don't know, is a province in northern India, and it's controlled partly by India and partly by Pakistan. Given that these two countries have a long history of ethnic rivalries, it's not all that surprising that an attack took place here. But this attack was particularly brutal. The attackers forced people to show them their identification, and if they were Hindus, well, I'll leave it to your imagination, but so far 26 people in that attack that we know of have lost their lives. The attackers were part of a group calling themselves the Kashmir Resistance, and they were Pakistani Muslims. So naturally, India blames Pakistan for this attack. And India's response has been pretty strong so far. They've demanded that every Pakistani citizen leave India within 48 hours. But really, that's just the tip of the iceberg, because India has also reneged on something called the Indus Waters Treaty. And what this is a treaty between the two countries that allows them to share water from the Indus Basin. This treaty has survived 2 previous wars between these countries, and that's probably because it's so important to both of them. 80% of Pakistan's agriculture depends on water from this basin. If India actually decides to turn off the water, Pakistan is going to be in a lot of trouble very quickly. A lot of people like to downplay absolutely everything that happens in the world, and they'll say that nothing ever happens. That is actually a viewpoint I'm somewhat sympathetic to, but this feels different. India is withdrawing from treaties that they've never withdrawn from before. They're asking all Pakistani citizens to leave India, which, if there were actually fighting, that would pose an insurgent threat within the country. It feels like they're taking preemptive actions, knowing that there's going to be a conflict coming. And actually, according to the Telegraph, there have already been skirmishes between Indian and Pakistani soldiers along the border. I think this is something we should take seriously. These two countries have a lot of people in them. They also have nuclear weapons. Now, I'm not suggesting for a second that this is going to be a nuclear hot war or anything like that, but it is something we should pay attention to. So if or when this war starts, what exactly will happen? Well, India will achieve pretty much everything that it wants to achieve in the region. They have 1.5 billion people. They have a lot more money and they have a more advanced military. There's just not really a great deal that Pakistan can do about it. But here in Britain, the situation is very different. There's approximately 3.5 million Pakistanis here and 3.5 million Indians. In all of our major cities up and down the country, I would expect to see massive protests, and it will be a nightmare for the police to deal with. Actually, this already started yesterday. In London, outside the Pakistani embassy, a group of Hindu-Indian protesters gathered, and a group of counter-protesters, Pakistani Muslims, also gathered, and they were kept separate by the Met Police throughout the entire day. Interestingly, the police didn't show up in full riot gear. They just opted for a bit of the old-fashioned soft-touch community policing. Inevitably, towards the end of the protest, someone from the Pakistani crowd tried to turn it into a Free Palestine march. But it turns out, when Pakistanis feel like Pakistan is under threat, they're not really that bothered about Palestine anymore. Funny how that works, isn't it? But what's less funny is the impending prospect of ethnic rival wars being carried out on the UK streets. And if you think that this won't turn violent, take a look at what happened in Leicester in 2022.
We're on Nelson Road right now. Stand up with the Hindu mobs. As you can see, look, they're throwing glass. They're throwing glass at us. They're throwing glass at us. throwing missiles. Wow, nearly got the police officer on the head. This is what the Hindu mobs are throwing. The Hindu mobs are throwing bottles in our direction. Look, again, another one. Wow.
Pretty heated stuff, right? And what exactly do you think caused that? It was a cricket match. Yes, it was a cricket match between Pakistan and India. India won. Indians came out onto the streets of Leicester to celebrate. They were met by some Pakistanis and a riot ensued. They're willing to do that over a cricket match. So just think about what they're probably willing to do when these two countries go to actual war with each other. It will be utter carnage. This is something we should take very, very seriously. And yes, Leicester will probably be the hotspot. Why? Because there's a very large contingent of Indians in Leicester and a smaller but also large contingent of Pakistanis. It's going to be a big problem. Fortunately, there aren't too many white British people left in Leicester to bear the brunt of this. Now, I mentioned at the start of this video that I think the police are already preparing for this, and footage emerged just a couple of days ago, a few days after the attack in Kashmir, of the police conducting riot training. A lot of people were upset when that footage emerged, and they were upset because the rioter was wearing a Union Jack on his shoulder. But I don't think that's the real story here. I think the real story is that a few days after an attack took place in Kashmir, thousands of miles away from England, the Met Police decided it was probably a good time to brush up on their riot drills. Look, let's be honest here. They're not as British as you and me. The British Indians and the British Pakistanis, they don't even see themselves as British in the way that you and I do. That is very, very obvious. When was the last time you saw two Englishmen go and riot or fight each other because of a cricket match that took place between two countries thousands of miles away? It just doesn't happen. They see themselves as Indian or they see themselves as Pakistani. And you can say that for pretty much any other group of people that have migrated into the UK. At some point, we've got to wake up and accept that we may have actually made a bit of a mistake by bringing millions of people here from rival ethnic groups. If you'd only brought Indians and no Pakistanis, then you at least wouldn't be having this fighting war on our streets. But you brought both groups to the UK and they hate each other for historical reasons. Reasons that actually we may have a little bit of a part in playing, but that's not the point, okay? It was a mistake. Multiculturalism has failed, and it's about time that we accept that. If you don't think that multiculturalism has failed, then think about this. Just how bad would it be if, say, Birmingham or Bradford was exactly half Indian and half Pakistani? It would be utter carnage and chaos. The only way that multiculturalism has worked is by keeping these enclaves separate from each other up and down the UK. You know, the Muslims are in Swindon, some of them in London, some of them in Leicester, the Pakistanis are in Bradford, Birmingham, whatever. The only way multiculturalism has worked is by keeping these groups completely separate from each other. But that's not multiculturalism. That is literally just colonialism. Anyway, I don't have a dog in this fight. If I had to pick a side, I would probably pick the Indians, but luckily I'm an Englishman. I don't have to pick a side. I would pick the Indians largely because I think that they've been wronged in this situation right from the get-go, but also because of some of the things that the Pakistani community here in the UK have done to us, and I'm pretty sure you know what I'm talking about. Look, I don't want to rant too much at the end of the video. I'm pretty guilty of doing this sometimes, just rambling towards the end. But you let me know what you guys think. I'm really, really curious. I think this is probably the most serious sort of national security threat that we're facing at the moment. I don't know if you guys see it that way. I wonder if MI5 and MI6 see it that way. I'd be very curious to be a fly on the wall in GCHQ right now. But who knows? Leave a like, leave a comment, subscribe, hit the bell icon, all of that good stuff. Until the next one.